So, I mean, if you want to look at our episodes so far, technically, we still have not talked about the Noxus region because technically, I consider her Ionian at this point.
All right, so this is us backtracking to Ionia?
Yeah. So technically.
Yeah, no, we don't talk about Noxus on this channel.
Yeah, we don't. We'll get there, guys. Give us time. They stop putting out damn cards. Maybe. Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 29. I'm your host, Ryan, here with your other host, Hetch.
What is up? And we have the hype train. It's leaving the station. Yeah, and we're hopping on it, baby.
We're here. The new patch is out. But first, housekeeping. You can listen to us everywhere. Follow us on Twitter if you haven't already. That's at podcastcore, C-O-R. And you can send an email to the same name at gmail.com. Please leave a like, follow, short review, comment, and tell a friend to join the side of peace and listen to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
That's such an uplifting message for what is a very depressing title episode.
War is hell.
War is hell, brother.
State of the game, I haven't played anything yet. I haven't even opened it and installed the update. I've just been I've been so behind. I've been watching videos and watching all the trailers and looking at the cards. But it's one of those periods in time when new patches come out where it's slightly overwhelming. So it's let me give it a couple days to pan out, and then I'll get in there. Once we figure out what cards are trash, what aren't, then I know what I'm looking at. And usually I do a lot of limited in that time frame. So these upcoming weeks, expect that. But just so happens that the patch hit, and then we did our episode right after, right? So yeah, there hasn't much time. But Hetch knows no bounds when it comes to releases. He's in there. Day one.
With you talking about how it's a crazy time to be jumping in and how you want to let it settle, you're a coward. I completely missed the memo of the card that was coming out with a set for Freljord, the Scar Grounds. Or the Scarground Arena for Freljord, which is a new landmark. And if a creature takes damage or survives damage, they get +1 attack and tough. So I'd already been messing around with Vladimir decks before this. I slept on this card and then immediately went, oh boy. And yeah, that's all I've been trying to play, other than a couple smooth brain ideas that I complained about off air because I don't want to hang my shame out there. So yeah, a lot of Vladimir decks. So yeah, there you go.
And you're always in the infinite race against Swim and Mogwai, right? They're all trying to get his ideas out.
This is going to date the episode, but 30 minutes before we started recording this, Mega Mogwai puts out a YouTube video of Vladimir with the Scar Grounds, and I'm so mad that I need to sit him down and yell straight in his face about how much I love his channel and I love his content. But now I'm just a poser because no one's gonna believe that I've been doing this the day before your video came out. But thanks, man. Keep it up. Keep shoving all that content out there. I will consume it all.
That was so passively aggressive, nice. Aggressively nice. Way to show respect. But let's go ahead and hop into the main topic, War is Hell, which it is. And Riven's story is a good one. We've been hyped to talk about it for a while. I mean, we've always alluded to how we wanted Riot to approach the card. And they did some things correctly I say correctly as if it's objective, but they did some things that appease what we wanted and then left out one big one that we really wanted. But we'll talk about that piece because it makes sense from a gameplay standpoint why they stayed away from that. Because we'll get there, but
yeah, it's not to mention the game is still so young. We get it, but we're all still going to be a little salty,
man. We'll settle for alternative art. All right, get us into the first spell here.
All right, so we can't talk about Riven unless we start talking about Riven's sword. So
Mm-hmm.
there's only one spell to talk about today. It's pretty obvious. We're going to be looking at the weapon hilt. So this is a 2-mana burst speed spell. Give an ally +2/+0 this round, and it has the new keyword for a lot of the Noxus cards from the set, which is Reforge. For anyone that's still that hasn't been looking at the patch or gotten a chance to play around with it, Reforge is a mechanic that's kind of a pseudo Riven mini game. So anytime you reforge or play a card with the Reforge keyword, it will make a burst speed spell in hand that is a blade fragment spell, one of 3 spells. And when you cast all 3 of the blade fragment spells, it creates the Blade of the Exile, which is Riven's sword. I don't want to get too much into that until we talk about Riven, but this is a mini game that was kind of built around Riven, which is also a new effect that is a call out to an older effect, because it's very similar to the gems from Targon, where you can only play the blade fragments on your turn and they can't be in response to a spell or in combat. So it's really cool that they're playing around with this limitation, because it does give them a little bit more freedom with burst speed spells, and hopefully kind of shows us that we're not going to have more instances where Ryan and I are crying about cards like Hush.
Yes. Notice they made this 2-mana, 2-mana burst spell.
2-mana burst speed.
Not on our radar. It's not on our radar. The 3-mana, we're watching. We're watching for you.
We're watching you, 3-mana. Oh Lord! But the weapon hilt itself, like outside of the reforge mechanic, it's very solid combat trick. And again, since it is burst speed, like this in Runeterra, we're kind of saying that like the combat tricks that are almost inherently just stat changes without keywords are almost always going to be burst speed at this point. So this kind of just fits what we expect from the game, and obviously the lore implications of it, because you got to build the Riven's blade. You can't have Riven without the big gigantic sword.
Yep. So. And I love the quote here on this card, and you guys know how good I am at reading. So to know your enemy, first know their weapon. It will tell you how they move, how they think, when they'll strike. It is the purest expression of its wielder. And it's funny because this reminds me directly of the game, because one of the biggest things when playing against a Riven was trying to figure out how she was going to do her combos, in what direction she was going to move. And it completely changed the game, really, when it came to the characters that came out after her, and just gameplay for melee characters in general. So this is actually a really strong, and obviously it introduces Ariel, the tractor. The tractor.
The tractor.
The tracker as well.
I was saying we didn't want to get into Riven too quickly, but she is a farmer, so of course she's got her trusty tractor.
I'm already in meme space. This is how my brain moves. We're already there, baby. So
you're too good.
I know. Take us to the follower now.
Oh Lord!
Yes. I messed up the segue too. It's like it's so fucked.
I can't. It's over. Stop the recording. Stop listening. Don't listen to this episode. That's a joke. Please keep listening.
Right
we
now.
love you.
Turn off right now.
We love you, our lovely
come
listeners.
Back in episode 30. All right. Yeah.
All right. So, and with the weapon hilt, the quote is actually, like you said, it's a direct quote from a card that we are going to talk about, which is Ariel the Tracker, or Ariel.
Yeah, is it Ariel or RL? I guess it would be
yeah, there's
RL.
not an I in the spelling, so I would probably go with RL.
Yeah.
I do like the sound of Ariel. Like that just kind of
rolls off the tongue better. I feel like all fantasy should have a dedicated portion of their site where they have a sound clip that tells you how to say their name.
Yes.
Or even phonetics. Phonetics are great. Yeah. But they always leave it up to the community. And the funny part about it is the creators will say it all differently. Like you'll hear different creators talk about it. And this is a big problem in nerd culture, and it needs to be fixed. I'm just saying that. This is my platform.
This is your soapbox. You can use it. All right, but so we'll go with RL.
RL sounds cool.
the Tracker, which is a 6-mana 2/5, so kind of weak stat line. But at round end, if you cast a spell on me this round, I strike the weakest enemy. And I love the flavor of this card because it kind of is a natural payoff mechanic to the mini game that we are starting to see from Riven that we already talked about with the weapon hilt, where you've got a target now to put some of these gem fragments or sword fragments onto. And you do get a reward for the sword fragment, which is, at the end of the round, the Arl is going to strike the weakest enemy on their board. And since it does have the limitation of the weakest enemy, you can usually, there is a theory crafted way where you can kind of get this to pop off and kind of keep taking out the chump blockers without having to commit too much into an attack if you don't want to. As far as with you looking at competitive play too, it also could be a reward for if you're having to burst pass and you're not really wanting to attack potentially into something into a big board wipe or anything like that. This kind of, there's a lot that could be done with this. It's just that that stat line at 6 mana is a little funky.
Yeah. Definitely. This is one of those cards that seems like a fun card to play with. I don't see it being competitive in any sense because it's one of those, you mentioned the stat line versus the cost, and that puts it in the win more category where you need so much of a setup for your opponent to be in, and then also you need to be the setup with the proper cards in hand, and then you can only really pull this stuff off when you're ahead. You can't really do it from behind.
Absolutely.
So it's definitely a flavor card, and I think it's a really cool approach to introduce that character.
Yeah, but it is a card I did want to bring up because obviously these weird goofy things always catch my eye, and I love doing stupid things. But also there's potential that Arl could really end up being important to the story.
Yeah.
Because Arl the Tracker. What is Arl tracking? Oh, and I'll let that be our segue into today's main topic.
You're better than me, man.
Riven. Yeah. The tractor.
The tractor.
Tilling the fields.
So we finally got Riven, and boys, this is a good story because it's a lot different from most of the stories we've seen at this point. I mean, you always have betrayal and being lost and exiled and all that stuff. But this is a good it's like the down to earth story in a world filled with magic and monsters and craziness, right?
The definition of humble beginnings.
Yes, exactly. So Riven was born essentially an orphan, right? Her father died in battle. Her mother died at birth, unfortunately. So she grew up just working on a Noxus farm, right? Noxus farm. And when the draft came through her town every so often, the conscriptors, she was like, you know what? I'm going to take this shot to get out of here, get out of this small town. I'm going to join the army. So she bounces and immediately stands out, right? Because she's a farmhand. She's working on the farm. She's strong. And one thing that she became known for was her, long sword wielding capabilities. Despite her size, her strength was insane and she was smart, and they considered her gifted. So she proved herself on, small battlegrounds. And part of the gifts she got was the magical runic blade she's known for. And she was given to it by the then Emperor of Noxus, Borum Darkwill. What a name.
I wish I had a little bit of a cooler title.
I know.
The Darkwill.
Right? The Darkwill.
I am Borum.
You got anything on the runic blade there? Do you the runic? Listen, legendary cool items are always cool.
100%. And not to mention too that the blade, even outside of the lore, they're already talking about that there's inscriptions on the blade too, and that stuff is always just yo, I love this. I want to know what the inscription is. I want to know who
Yeah.
came up with it. Like movie of mine that I love to death is The Last Samurai with Tom
Hmm.
Cruise, and I almost like that was almost like my final step into trying to learn kanji because like they give him his sword,
Yeah.
and it's like has the inscription on it, and I'm just like yes,
That's so cool. It's a
yes.
message. You and my mother love that movie.
It's a good movie. I will
It is.
convert you.
It's solid. It's solid.
When the recording's done, we're gonna have words.
La Chancla.
La chancla. Carajo.
But the one thing that differs here is she never names the blade, right? It's just known as this legendary or this epic weapon that she wields, and she does so well. So after she's given this weapon, she's tasked with a mission to escort some precious cargo, which is essentially this new weapon they designed as they're battling with Ionia, and they're moving this into the Ionian region. They need her support, and she's there. But this is around the time where she starts to understand that during this battle, there's not really any righteous goal of this Noxus attack, right? And while escorting the transport, everything goes wrong. And you've probably seen this in like certain war movies, etc. But they're transporting this weapon, and then a storm happens, and they get stuck. And as they call for help to their nearby allies, all they see is a rain of arrows coming towards them from their allies. At this point is when, freeze frame, record scratch.
You're probably wondering how I got here.
Yeah. So Riven, the first thing she does is pull out her blade and use it essentially like a shield because it's so massive as this cargo explodes, causing insane amount of caustic damage to the area, to both Ionian forces and the Noxus forces. And she's like, what the hell? So as after the aftermath of this, this event kind of sticks with her, and she essentially self-exiles right after that in the Ionian region and starts to suffer from what essentially is PTSD. And this is probably the first time, we've seen something so, I guess, this real displayed in Legends of Runeterra, right? Where you have this war, because it's a constant war going on. So you have this person suffering from the aftermath of something they experienced during wartime. And part of this PTSD led her to, take that hatred and destroy the sword, because the sword was given to her by the man in charge of all this, right? So she breaks it, still doesn't feel any better because that's not really the cause of the hatred, and then takes refuge with an Ionian village who takes her in as one of their own. They show her mercy. They forgive her for the part she played in this whole war. And after that point is when the manhunt starts. So we get back to Aurel the Tracker, where Noxus forces are being sent in to find her and to bring her back for, desertion. Which is a common that's how it works, is they go because they might have secrets the soldier might have, especially her being a special soldier in the army. And then what happened if that gets out, right? Yeah. That could be a bad stain on you, et cetera, et cetera.
Like such a recognized figure carrying what could potentially be such a recognized blade as well.
Yes.
That's a loose end.
That's a loose end, exactly. So, she says, in order to kind of redeem herself, she doesn't want to bring any more trouble to the Ionian people who she's caused trouble in the past and have taken her in. So she gives herself up. They take her back to Noxus, and she's essentially in prison is where we're left, as their captive until further action is taken. And at this point, she's still suffering from her afflictions, and she's just waiting for something better to happen. And with that, we're given the illusion of Dark Will is no longer the emperor for reasons, and there's a new rise of an emperor or emperor of sorts, and Noxus is changing. Their ideals are changing. The way how they function is changing, and will that play into her benefit? We don't know yet.
Yeah. And the story also just like leaves a lot of question marks too, because the explosion that ended up being the final straw to lead to Riven's desertion they talk about the alchemist that put this together.
Yeah.
Who is that? With the blade, it has these runed carvings put on it by some sorceress. Who's this sorceress? Riven's story has, that it doesn't even end there too, because there's also a tale going around Ionia that a weapons master was killed at the same time that her blade was destroyed.
Yep.
Who could that be? Like, there's a lot. Like, there's so many rippled effects off of Riven's just initial story. And as far as anybody that's looking into lore for just, to put the pieces together, this is just the stuff that's just like, this is what makes me click, like, go to next chapter and keep reading.
Yep, this is that you hit the nail on the head there, and it also fits back into that humble beginnings, because Riven's such a small piece of something greater going on, right? So let's look at the card. And the card, obviously interesting. They did a great job. So what we talked about is they did a great job of capturing the combo effect of how she plays in League of Legends. So she's a 3-cost, 3/4 with, when you gain the attack token, Reforge. And to level up is when I see Blade of the Exile in your hand. So you get Blade of the Exile by assembling 3 pieces of her weapons. So once you do the reforging, and then you have the Blade of Exile, which allows her to flip. So you get this combo as you play to get her to that point of using the full weapon, which you know from the game if you've played it. And then when she flips, she has, when you gain the attack token, Reforge. But now, when my power is increased for the first time each round, increase it by twice as much. So once again, this combo ability where you're going round to round to round by still progressing Riven as a character, which is cool. I mean, it's a cool way to design this card. It makes it so that low cost isn't broken, right? Because she's low costed but has a fat butt, right? So it's a strong card on its own face, but it's not completely broken until you put the effort into it to keep her going.
Yeah, I think it's dangerous for us to be talking about Riven's butt here. True. I've added myself too much with, like, our Lux episode and stuff. Like, I need you to come bring it back. But no, like, it is important to point that out too, because, like, this is not like Arl, where the stat line doesn't match up with the mana cost. I mean, we've had 3 drops get nerfed down to 3/4s, and they still are, solid cards. So this is a great stat line. And then that level up is, like, you could argue that it's not necessary to level up Riven to be competitive, but there's also people like me that look at the level up effect and imagine putting Battle Fury on Riven and just getting plus 16 damage in this turn and popping off.
Yeah.
I am not saying I have a problem. I am saying that I am building this, and I will figure it out.
Yeah. The quote here, once again, fits really well with giving the positive side of her view from getting outside of this, PTSD, where she says, "I will not run from what I was. I made a promise to mend what I have broken." And then once it flips is, "and I will not run from those who would break me," which obviously is an analogy to the sword, et cetera, which we'll talk about later, what happens to the sword when they get the piece back together, et cetera, et cetera.
That quote right there was just like, man, queen.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. What a bad girl.
Queen of Spades.
Queen of Spades. Yeah. So Riven's a baller, man.
Yeah, it's a dope card. So the only grief we had was, and this wasn't really an original idea. I think this was a shared idea across community, was Absolutely. That people were hoping that it would be a 2-region card. So essentially at the beginning, so her first form would be Noxus, and then when she flips, she would be an Ionian card. And that would mean that you'd be able to play her as one of either region, right? So she would count towards either one when building a deck. People thought that would be cool, right? Because you could have, like, essentially 3 Noxus champions instead of, 3, or have her as a Noxus champion when you want to play other Ionian stuff, et cetera, and play around with that. But that didn't end up being the case, or she would also have like Ionian cards that were related to her versus Noxus cards that related to her that fit in those archetypes. So didn't happen, but it's very complex.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of people on the Runeterra subreddit were already just theory crafting like the kind of implications that could happen if you could put this in as a dual type card.
Yeah.
Not just on the gameplay, but just like the other characters that could come in. The one that pops in my head right off the top of my head is Xin Zhao, who is a Demacian diplomat. Well, he's a Ionian diplomat in Demacia, and so he already has like both of the nations kind of in his story inherently, and like it's a lot of fun that you could have, like theory crafting these dual type cards. But like we said earlier in the episode, I totally get why it's not happening yet, or if it or if why they haven't outright said, like Riot hasn't outright said whether they're going to do a dual type or not. The game's so young. It totally makes sense. We're just going to be sad because it would have been like the Omega hype train.
I know, right?
Like, yo, dual color. Whoa!
So, I mean, if you want to look at our episodes so far, technically we still have not talked about the Noxus region, because technically I consider her Ionian at this point.
All right, so this is us backtracking to Ionia.
So technically,
no, we don't talk about Noxus on this channel.
Yeah, we don't. We'll get there, guys. Give us time. They stop putting out damn cards. Maybe.
What are you talking about? They gave us apprehend.
So this takes us to the point in the episode near the end here where Hetch gets a challenge question, or just a challenge in general. And this one is going to be related to what we're talking about, which is if you had a special weapon, what would it be?
Oh, okay.
And I mean, I'll go first. I've always been a fan of scimitars. It's something about, it's a sword still, but like the curve of the sword, and yes, I'm a Dristordan fan. Like any other nerd out there who reads Forgotten Realms stuff, I get it. All right, bro. I know what I'm about. But scimitars are cool. The way with how they're curved, how they differ when you use them in battle from other swords, because they're meant to be used for parrying type maneuvers. So I would like a. Now I don't know if I want it to be a demonic scimitar or if it's like a sentient one that has a mind of its own. And what kind of elemental power would I want it to have? I think ice is cool. So let's go with like a frost demon, because I want a cool backstory, right? Like I want to have a sword that I have to bargain with to not completely corrupt me. So let's do a frost demonic scimitar.
Okay. Yeah, you went full Forgotten Realms the moment that you were waiting. Okay, is this what the podcast is about to become?
Was I reading some earlier today? I don't know, but Boundless is pretty good so far.
No, I like it. I like it. I like everything about it. So, but this also gives me a little bit more creative agency with what I was about to say, which works in my favor too, because I already know what my weapon would be. Because I would have to go to one of my favorite pastimes, the first love of my life. Yeah. So my weapon would be a club or a hammer. So that way I could successfully just transition my baseball swing into full-on combat. All right, which
smooth transition of skill.
Yeah, like it would really kind of dampen the learning curve for me. And I would want to keep it simple. I wouldn't really. Yeah. I don't know about like having like a cursed, like a demonic kind of thing.
Yeah.
like if we're going a little bit more like, let's Hetch's backstory here.
Yeah.
Then it probably would be more like a paladin's kind of weapon. So a little bit of like,
so blessed,
maybe blessed,
hammer.
maybe some radiant damage. But what I would love damage wise, like I would rather have it blessed and have the blessing not really do anything, because I'd want the damage to just be bonus force damage. Like I'm swinging for the fences, baby. Like I want this to be Hetch's home run club.
Yeah, I think you've built this consistent lore here over our episodes, which, that's obviously the plug for you all to go listen to all the rest of the episodes, because the questions and your answers have lined up to a point to where, like, you have the top half of a bear, you have a mount named Cervantes who is sentient and who also has his own hammer. You now have a hammer which is blessed with holy light.
Yes.
And it's just like, what is happening?
Yeah, this podcast is a really roundabout way for me to advertise the book that I'm pushing to be published, which is Hetch's Adventures, A Cuban Wrinkle in Time.
That's a terrible title.
It's a work in progress, man. All right, like it's not published yet or anything. You just kind of spilled the beans on it. So I'm not trying to, like I got caught. We might as well just throw it out there, like true title pending.
I know
I'm working on it.
It's working title. So with that, as always, guys, thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with the next episode.
You want to be my editor, by the way? Take care, everybody.